All right, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the UCP and kind of Alberta as a whole because, um, given the fact that they continue to push lockdowns and I guess, a word synonymous with lockdowns is economy destroying, but um, I think a lot of stuff needs to be brought up and fleshed out here. So, from Drew Barnes saying, tone deaf CEOs think Albertans need to pay higher taxes. Calgary Sun, in the BCA's report, the government needs to reduce spending. If Alberta brought its per person spending down to levels in Ontario, Alberta would have a nearly $900 million surplus. And this is something that the lefties never bring up. And I really wish Jason Kenney would bring it up more too, because he always talks about cutting spending and being more fiscally responsible, but he never brings this up. And this is one of the most important things that he should be bringing up. Because if he says we're just cutting spending to the rate of other major provinces, now, again, the lefties would still claim that he hates the poor and he wants to destroy healthcare and all that stuff, but at least they would look even more insane than they already do. And this is another thing that a lot of people may say that's BS too, but what they don't tell you is that what is his name? There's this economist from the University of Calgary that they always like to quote, like they always like to quote this guy, and he even acknowledges this as well. That again, one of the reasons why Alberta is struggling right now is that, again, Alberta pays its public sector employees significantly higher than the other major provinces, namely Ontario. Like I said, that, or like they say here, that if Alberta pays its per person spending down to levels in Ontario, it would have a nearly $900 million surplus, right? That's a lot of money. And this is the thing that the left doesn't want people to, and this is just how crazy the left is too. And when people hear the NDP are socialists and they scoff at that, again, like how insane do you have to be? Alberta already spends money. I think the number is like 20%. I don't know remember the exact number, but given the fact we could be running a surplus if we were spending at the rate of Ontario, the number has to be at least into the double digits. Um, if we brought that spending down, we could have a surplus, right? The left is concerned that this spending is coming down lately, but again, the spending has to come down one way or the other too. Like this is the other thing that the left always pushes is that we need a GST or an HST or whichever one, right? Um, but again, like there's several problems with that. Number one, any economist with half a brain will tell you that just because you raise taxes doesn't mean you guarantee to increase government revenue, especially at the rate that you increase taxes. So again, if the government raises taxes by 5%, you're not going to get a 5% increase, like income taxes. You're not going to get 5% more income taxes out of people. Like let's just say, the average you get $1 billion, $1 billion in income tax in the average year, and you raised income taxes by 5%. You're not going to get that extra 50 billion, right? Or sorry, 50 million, not 50 billion. So again, that's something that people really need to understand is that, and this is one of the many reasons why these leftists are insane, is that they would argue that again, if you raise taxes by X percent, you raise revenue by X percent. And again, anyone that understands basic economics should understand that that's not true. If you go back and look at a long-term chart of taxes as a percentage of GDP, right? You'll quickly notice that the percentage of taxes as a percentage of GDP, the number remains fairly constant, even though tax rates are constantly changing, right? So that's something people need to understand too. And the other reason why the left really hates to hear that too is that um, when you lower taxes, a lot of times you don't get less revenue either, right? Because when you lower taxes, usually productivity increases, meaning you get more taxes, right? And again, the left always comes back with, oh, trickle down economics, which is just proof they have no idea what they're doing, because no, trickle down economics was kind of made up during the Reagan era by the leftists, even though no major free market supporting politicians have ever said, I'm a big fan of trickle down economics, right? It's kind of like the term, at least in not nearly to the same degree, it's kind of like the term racist or sexist, that the left can just throw it out there and think that it proves them right, even though they have no idea what they're talking about. And again, you know this because, again, like I said, if lowering taxes meant revenue went down, then all you would have to do is look back in history and prove that, right? Because I would imagine there's several times throughout history to where government has lowered taxes. Meaning all you would have to do is compile large amounts of times to where the government lowered taxes, look at the look at the corresponding the amount of government revenue, and then do the opposite and compare them. Right? The fact that the left never does this is just another one of the reasons why they're wrong. Right? Because again, if government revenue went up significantly when you raise taxes, all they would have to do is show that. And the other big important thing too is that even if that is the case, even if government revenue goes up, it still doesn't mean it's going to be better off for the economy and people as a whole. Because when the government taxes money, that's money that otherwise would have been spent anyway. So not only would you need to prove that when the government taxes more money, government revenue goes up, especially at a proportionate rate. Because if you raise taxes 10% and revenue comes up 1%, you kind of like, what's the point? If you put a 5% GST in and you get a 0.5% increase, like, okay, really didn't get anywhere, right? You just took an extra 5% of people's, well, not actually 5%, but 5% on top of what they're buying, but you only increased things by 0.1%. And the other thing that completely contradicts the whole GST, we need a GST, HST thing is that the left's argument for the carbon tax is that we need a carbon tax because it de-incentivizes people from, using too much gas, using too much heat, using too much anything to where oil and gas is required to use, or which is pretty much everything. But let's just talk about the direct things. The left's argument is, oh, it's supposed to de-incentivize you from using it. But on the other hand, they also said, oh, we have this revenue shortage, so we need to increase taxes. Well, okay, you just told me that the point of the carbon tax was to de-incentivize people from doing certain things, but now you're saying we need to raise tax, we need to implement this tax, and it's not going to de-incentivize people from doing things. Like, again, like it's just a blatant contradiction. Now, the carbon tax doesn't work. We have the numbers that show that, but the carbon tax doesn't work in large parts because the things that it's going after most are things you need to do. Right? Like you still need food, you still need to heat your house, you still need um, you, you you still need to fill up your car with gas, like all this kind of stuff, right? And not to mention too, um, the population is constantly increasing, right? Especially because the Trudeau government's bringing in massive amounts of immigrants, right? So maybe it's making a little bit of a difference, but it clearly isn't anything significant. So again, it's just another testament to the fact that taxes almost always have the opposite intended consequences. Right? Taxes in certain ways will de-incentivize people from doing things. Like I said, the data is very clear that um, increasing income taxes will lower productivity. Right? We know that. But how do we know that we don't know that implementing a carbon tax will lower carbon? But again, I think the big difference there is that there's so much more that goes into a carbon tax as compared to an income tax. An income tax is pretty straightforward. Right? A carbon tax is a tax on pretty much every good and service in existence. Not to mention a lot of times it's double, triple, quadruple taxed, right? So again, there's a lot more into that point. But the other thing I wanted to bring up too is that the left is, like I said, I've been pretty hard on the left in this video, so I got to push back on the UCP as well. The UCP have done a terrible job. Like, let's just be honest. Prior to the virus, I would give them maybe like a C plus, B minus, like so-so. But what I thought they would be better than the NDP, but still nowhere near what we needed. Now I would definitely downgrade them significantly because they've supported the lockdowns even after there's proving that the lockdowns aren't doing anything. Um, but again, like if the UCP actually wanted to help this stuff, they would tell people we're only cutting spending. I don't even know if they are cutting spending. They aren't, because they're cutting spending to a point to where we're still spending at a rate higher than the other major provinces. They say, oh, they're cutting spending on healthcare. No, they're just cutting the rate at which there is an increase in spending on healthcare. They're cutting the school funding. Oh, well, what they don't tell you is that, again, a classroom of 25 kids is getting like $300,000 a year in funding. Please tell me how that's not enough. Like, if anything, that's way too much. Like, if anything, that's too much. In fact, I would argue it's way too much. But again, that's a different story in and of itself. So, again, like if if the UCP actually wanted to do something here, and this is the thing too, that the only legitimate thing that I can think of to why they're not actually growing a spine and having some balls is that they're afraid of the blowback from the left. But again, anyone who understands the political landscape these days should understand that if you have conservative next to your name, the left is going to hate you no matter what you do. Like, Jason Kenney has given in to pretty much everything when it comes to these lockdowns, but yet guess what? They still hate him. So this is the thing that I just cannot understand about the right wingers, at least the more moderate ones, the more establishment ones, is that um, again, I understand why they're doing it. At the end of the day, they're sellouts. They always were sellouts, and again, it's all political theater. But um, if they actually had some integrity, they would actually just like this is the reason why Trump was so hated, right? It's not because he was bad. I mean, he was better than, you got to go back at least a generation to find a president that was better than him. He still had a lot of things that he was wrong about, I think. But the reason Trump was hated so much at the end of the day is that Trump actually spoke his mind. I think he could have done it even more, to be quite honest. But that's the reason he was hated so much. I mean, you look at Andrew Scheer, Aaron O'Toole, Mitt Romney, John McCain, these kind of people, they don't speak their minds, right? They don't speak their minds. They're just doing what the establishment wants, right? That's all they're worried about, right? So to be quite honest, like, this is the reason why I think Alberta and Canada as a whole are so screwed, is that no matter who we get, we're screwed, right? The UCP are refusing to actually be conservative, and the NDP or just want socialism, which would be even worse. But at the end of the day, we're screwed either way. Like, the people who say, "Oh, we gotta vote in the UCP or the Conservatives because the other guys are worse." Well, not much. Like, not much worse. Like, I hate to break it to people, but they're not much worse. Like, what can you look at that the Conservatives are doing or want to do that's actually going to make a significant difference? Same goes for the UCP in Alberta. Like, maybe stand up for the oil and gas sector, but again, how much of that do you think is actually genuine? Like, that's the other big problem with conservatives. The thing that scares me the most, and the reason why I don't vote for them anymore, um, is, again, a lot of times they like to talk a big game, but they get in office and they do nothing. Or they talk a big game, but when push actually comes to shove, they don't actually do anything. Like, that's something that's constantly on my mind, is that if Jason Kenney and Jason Kenney only had the power to get these pipelines through, do you think he'd actually do it? Or do you think he's actually only doing it because he thinks it's just what the base wants? And given the fact that he's completely sold out on the lockdown situation, I think he's just saying it because it's music to the ears of the base. I don't think he actually cares at the end of the day. I think he's a complete sellout, right? So again, that is kind of what I wanted to bring up today. If you liked the video, like I said, make sure you hit that like and subscribe. Stay tuned for more. If you like, make sure you check out those links below. Follow me on those other platforms if you haven't already. If you want to donate, you could do that as well. Again, I would very much appreciate whatever support I can get. But like I said, at the very least, just hit that like and subscribe and stay tuned for more.